Hello again, everybody. Welcome back to the Virtual Southern, the inaugural Virtual Southern, hopefully the last ever. I'm Sean Delaney from Delaney and Sons, joined by someone who all of you probably know or know of, is Diggory Hadoke over in England, in Shropshire, a prolific writer and vintage gun enthusiast and expert. And he's agreed to take some time today to talk to all of us about vintage guns and sort of the state of the market over in the UK and on the broader market as it might affect the United States, and just sort of what the state of play is. So welcome, Diggory. Hope all's well.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
How's everything going in sunny England?
Well, it has been sunny for the last few days. It's been perfectly summer-like, but we've had a few rain clouds roll in today and give us a little bit of a smattering, which has actually been quite good because I've been planting trees in the field and trying to build a little bit of woodland in there, and they needed a little bit of moisture, so no problem with that.
Excellent. Well, I know you were planning on coming to North Carolina next weekend for the Southern Side-by-Side Classic, and obviously that was canceled. But one of the things that is always on everybody's mind, and obviously it's a group of vintage gun enthusiasts, especially British gun enthusiasts. Sort of what's the state of the market now? What do you see in the vintage gun market today?
Well, it's interesting. Obviously, you can consider perhaps the UK market and the US market as different markets. Although with the advent of auctions taking over so much in the last 15 years or so, a lot of the traditional barriers have broken down. So you've got people from the US and from all over the world shopping in England alongside English and British buyers. So it's the demarcations between the markets, I think, in some ways have changed quite a lot and come down. Although I do still notice big discrepancies in the pricing of guns between British and American dealers. I mean, that's been the case for a very long time. And I remember needing to sell a Purdy 20-bore hammer gun some years ago because I needed to fund a trip to Africa to join a friend on an elephant hunt in Botswana. And I sold that 20-bore Purdy hammer gun to an American dealer for £5,500, which was about the right money for it. Maybe he got a decent deal, but that was okay. It served its purpose. But I saw that gun advertised later in the Double Gun Journal on the dealer's website for $55,000.
Wow.
So that gives you an idea of the sort of markups that we're seeing some of the American dealers put onto the American market, which is why it's not surprising we get so many Americans who come directly to the UK auctions and also to UK dealers to try and pick stuff up, because you certainly don't see that kind of inflated price being put onto the typical UK dealers' prices when you compare them with what stuff's going for in auction. But I think the other side of it is that auction prices have become much closer to retail prices. I'm seeing far fewer dealers, particularly in the UK, being able to buy anything in auction with a view to tidying it up and selling it on for a good retail profit, because you've got people coming straight into the auctions and treating them as retail environments.
Do you think maybe there's the British dealers are getting pushed to the sort of not lesser quality but lower condition guns that then they have to put more work, more investment into to put it back into the retail market?
Well, I've seen American dealers buying at the lower end as well, and I think there is quite a big market in the States for stuff at the few $100 range, sub $1,000 range. So I see stuff actually being picked up by American dealers that a lot of British dealers just wouldn't bother with. So at one end of the market, it's the reverse of what you've just said. But I think at the other end of the market, a lot of the big money is in the States, and a lot of the big money guns, the super quality, super condition, great provenance, those are going to the States, and those are going into the big collections of the big collectors, and often via the big American dealers. Although I am seeing quite a lot of stuff in America. I think it's fair to say that when you go somewhere like the Southern, you see far better, a far better range of English guns on the dealers' tables than you'll ever see at any event in England these days. There is just so much kit that's in America.
That's interesting. Well, what about, I mean, obviously we had maybe a month and a half ago, you had the voluntary phase out of lead, sort of the prospective phase out of lead. Curious to see whether it actually happens, but my suspicion would be that the legislature would catch up with that and make it a mandatory ban of lead. But just wanted to get your thoughts on that and the impact on the vintage gun market as well.
Yeah, that's a very good point you bring up. I mean, the 8 shooting organisations, UK-based shooting organisations that came forward and said that they advocate a 5-year withdrawal plan to remove lead as a hunting projectile from this country. A lot of that is driven by the European Chemicals Agency and the way the status that they're giving to lead, both as lead in the environment and lead in the food chain. They're becoming far less tolerant of that. And I think we're seeing that is going to be, certainly by 2026, probably featured in a lot of European legislation. And people might say, well, Britain's come out of Europe, so why do we care? Well, the answer is if we want to sell into Europe, we have to meet their standards. And if we want to take part in anything which is at all linked to European standards, then either we comply or we can't play. So I think a lot of people's ideas on Brexit, like if we came out of Europe, suddenly we could just do what we liked. It's kind of cuckoo land, you know, reality is starting to set in. So I think what we will see, certainly it's not a call for a ban, it's a call for voluntary withdrawal of lead. I think it was preemptive. I think that there was probably whispers going on behind the scenes where people were telling the shooting organisations, look, this has been going on for 20 years, we've heard all the semantic arguments, the bottom line is lead is bad, the wheels of movement are removing it from everything, from paint to petrol to what you name it, it's coming out. Yeah. Shotgun ammunition is on the same trajectory, it's going to come out. So plan for it, get used to it. Otherwise, we'll find ourselves in a situation like we have with a lot of other legislation where simply you wake up one day and there's a directive saying you can't buy this or sell this or shoot this anymore. Right. So it's given the gun trade 5 years to try and work something out. And I think in some respects, there's been some quite clever moves going on, because if the shooting organisations have stolen a march on the legislators and said, look, yeah, leave us alone for 5 years because we're dealing with this. So don't make legislative time, which is costly and time consuming and has to fight for parliamentary time with other things. Give us 5 years to see if we can show you that we can sort this out ourselves. Now, if in 5 years' time we can show that most shooting is now being done with non-toxic alternatives to lead, let's say 85 or 90% change of use. Well, that would leave perhaps people who are using 2.5-inch chambered English guns that are really only suited to use with lead or bismuth, are still able to do their game shooting, which is a tiny fraction of the amount of shooting that goes on in the UK, with lead. And they'll be doing it in such small numbers that the environmental impact is virtually zero. And you can then go to legislature and say, look, we've got 85% compliance. 85% of the shooting going on in the UK is without lead. Is 85% compliance good enough for you to not bother with legislation? It may even be 95%. The number of people that are shooting old English guns at driven pheasants is relatively small. And I think that might just give us a little bit more say in the way that things are done, rather than just waiting for those on high to come with a big hammer and whack us over the head with it.
That's a good point. Can you get a vintage British gun reproofed to shoot steel or not?
Again, very good question. What the proof houses are saying at the moment is if you have a an English gun with 2¾ inch chambers, which was proofed after 1954, then even if it's not steel shot proofed, you can use that gun with standard steel loads. Now we have two types of steel loads here under the CIP, standard steel and superior steel. Now the superior steel proof carries the fleur-de-lis stamps on the proof marks.
Yeah.
But they're exempting that, but they're saying if you've got these post-1954 nitro-proof 2¾ inch chambered guns, you can shoot standard steel loads through the gun. Although they say you shouldn't really do it if you have chokes tighter than half.
Yeah.
Now, there are a number of issues there. One of them is the issue of what proof means. Proof has always been exactly what it says. It's proof that your gun can be used safely with the kind of load that they've tested it with in the proof house. What they're saying now is if your gun's been tested and proved with lead, you can assume that with some steel loads, it's okay. Well, that's not proof, that's supposition. And they're totally washing their hands of any guns proofed before 1954. So for a lot of us, that's the kind of stuff we love. Our pre-30s game guns and our Victorian hammer guns. So in terms of steel shot, no, those are not an option. Your options are bismuth. I don't know what bismuth costs in America, but over here it's cheapest, in its cheapest form. It's about £1 a shot.
It's about the same here.
Yeah, I think Game Bore do one which is about £1.24 a shot, and the Ely ones are at £1.04 a shot. It may be the other way around. I can't remember now. But
yeah. Compare
Compare that with 35p for a premium lead load like Game Bore Regal or something, or Ely VIP, or about £2.24 for tungsten matrix. Steel is about 25p a shot in equivalent load, but obviously a lot of our guns we can't use that in.
Yeah, and can you use tungsten?
Yeah, you can. Tungsten's basically a polymer, a resin polymer, and it's pliable enough to be a straight swap for lead.
Okay.
It's the expense that's going to cause a lot of problems for a lot of people. But I think it should be noted that over here there is no suggestion that we have a ban on using lead for competition shooting or for clay shooting. So it would purely be for game. So you could continue to shoot your competitions and your practice with lead, but it's just when you go after live quarry that you would have to swap out for something non-toxic. Which, unless you're shooting massive bags, massive days right through the season, it's not going to break the bank. No one likes paying more, but ammunition is still a relatively small part of the cost of a day's game shooting, as you know.
And isn't there a bit of a trade-off though? Because as far as I recall, I don't know how it works with tungsten, but with steel you have to have a shot cup. You can't use fiber wads. That's
right. And it's interesting that the move to remove lead is also coming alongside the momentum that we're seeing in removing plastic from the environment. I think plastic wads have no place in game shooting at all. I don't see any excuse for them, particularly with lead cartridges. But if we're moving away from lead, then yes, steel cartridges are traditionally encased in quite tough polythene or polyurethane wads in order to protect the barrels. Now, a number of companies recently have come out with, Ely in particular, have come out with a water-soluble plastic wad. So it's made out of vegetable starch, from what I understand, and it will dissolve in water in a matter of hours. So
okay.
It's robust enough. If you get it wet, it doesn't dissolve instantly. It has to sit in water to dissolve, but it dissolves into a non-chemical plant-based sludge that just dissolves into nothing eventually. That's ready for use with steel shot, and it's ready now.
Okay.
So in 5 years' time, if they continue working on it, and if there's an economic imperative there to provide a market with what it wants in terms of non-polluting plastic wadding for steel shot, I think it's probably within the realms of our expertise in the cartridge manufacturing industry to meet that demand.
It'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. I understand that there's a relatively new online journal that people can go to see sort of what the state of play is and interesting articles.
Well, thank you for plugging that. Yeah, the Vintage Gun Journal. As you know, I've written 3 books, and 1 or 2 people have bought them, which is always nice. But people often ask me when the next book is coming out. But frankly, the first 3 books cover the main chunks of what I wanted to say to the world about old guns.
Yeah.
And rather than just droning on and finding random things to keep trying to put books together for, I've decided to try and keep the message going by creating an online journal, which is free to view. Just go to Google and type in Vintage Gun Journal, and monthly it's updated with articles by me, by Donald Dallas, by Nick Harlow, the gunroom manager at Purdy, by Tom Dames, who's a professional hunter in Botswana, by a whole range of different people. David Baker's done some articles for me, and I'm gathering some good people with specialist knowledge to provide articles. And the beauty of not having to do a book, which is every 5 years or so, means I can be reactive. So we can talk about issues like this as and when they happen, and keep people abreast of what's going on, and try new things out and report the findings of them straight away.
Much quicker. Well, yeah, and is that available at your website as well?
It is. It's all part of the same website. So if you go on to vintageguns.co.uk, you'll be faced with 3 buttons. You can go to services, where we can see if we can do something for you. You can go to guns for sale, which is self-explanatory, or you can go to the Vintage Gun Journal, which is a standalone journal. So I'm quite happy for people to just come and read the journal, enjoy it. They don't need to come and buy anything from me. They don't need to register with me. They don't need to enroll me to do anything for them. It's really just part of getting the message out there that vintage guns are fun, vintage guns are relevant, and it's, I hope, a pool of knowledge which enthusiasts can share with one another. And really, at the end of the day, that's all I consider myself. I'm an enthusiast for this stuff, and I like to communicate that enthusiasm with people out there who share the same interests.
Well, it is infectious. Well, again, sorry we are going to miss you next weekend and miss everybody else, but look forward to seeing you soon, either in England or over here in the States. Stay safe, and thanks again for taking the time. And anyone else who's interested in following up on this, again, it's vintageguns.co.uk, and you can check out Diggory's articles and those of other contributors, as well as the shop and services. So thanks a lot, Diggory. Talk to you soon.
Thank you. I was very disappointed to miss the show this year. It's always beautifully organised, and you always meet some of the most interesting people that you run into in the gun trade over there, and see some fantastic stuff. I mean, whatever you say about the American market, there is no doubt that those guys that are running the American dealerships have the best English guns in the world that you can go and see and pick up and check out. And if you've got a big enough bank account, maybe even buy one. But it's just a treat to be able to see the stuff. So thank you very much. It's nice to talk to you, Sean.
You too. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.